Early addressing. And if you don't do that early, we have seen that in many conflicts, a situation is being reached which is creating irreversible effects. And then escalation gets a momentum of itself, and then you can hardly do anything anymore with political means. A conflict, domestic conflict, where we had not UN-based, but anyway, international early addressing was, for instance, the conflict in Kenya a couple of years ago. And I think we have been, international community, together with Kenyans, been a bit more successful. Early addressing. Number 3. In order to do so effectively, you need an adequate international political capacity. We are building at the moment an international political capacity for situations which we call beyond conflict, the peace-building approaches. Okay. It's not yet adequate, much can be said about it, but anyway we made a start in peace-building beyond conflict. But we need also a political capacity before violent conflict escalation. Not peace building, but you can't say war prevention, but anyway, violent escalation prevention. And we have to do that internationally with political means. And that means not in the framework on the basis of the procedures of the Security Council, because then you get paralyzed. But you have to do that in a political body within the international community, UN-based, with a Security Council mandate, but not with Security Council procedures, so that you can internationally, in an international body, charter-based, address political issues within individual countries with the power of the Secretary General of the United Nations. Mandated by the Security Council, but not Security Council procedures, in order to be flexible and effective. And if you then do not succeed, then at a certain moment, it can be brought to the Security Council itself. We are lacking the chamber before, the political chamber before. That's number 3. Number 4. In all these processes, peacemaking, peace building, peacekeeping, you need, of course, a common approach, and that requires consensus, and that requires unanimity between all the parties. Now, in the framework of the Security Council, we have, of course, organized ourselves in order to get consensus, and that prerequisite of consensus sometimes, as I said, is paralyzing the whole situation. And that's why I'm also coming with a number of other suggestions, not to deal with it internationally, but not always in the framework of the Security Council procedures. But there is more than this, because all those countries who are members of the United Nations also do have their bilateral contacts and the bilateral interventions, humanitarian, political, economic, whatever. And it is very important, and many of these conflicts fail, conflicts addressing fail, because there is a huge gap between the individual bilateral political contacts of the members of the Security Council and of the United Nations and the common approach of the international community as a whole. And that means that very often many different conflicting signals are being given to the powers in the country, and they are extremely well versed, in particular in Sudan, that's the whole history of Sudan, to play all partners against each other, to divide and rule within their country and also internationally. That's number 4. Number 5, you need, in addressing these conflicts, a comprehensive approach. You cannot just leave out a specific major issue and concentrate fully on other issues. In Sudan, we have done that. We were concentrating on finally getting a North-South peace, and we isolated this fully from the Darfur conflict and also from the conflict in the East. Now, of course, politically, you cannot do everything at the same time. And you need sometimes a step-by-step approach. But a step-by-step approach is a step-by-step approach. It does not mean that some steps are not being taken. okay, or only will be taken after you finalize something else. You have to bring everything together in an overall political framework. And maybe, looking backwards, we should not have finalized the CPA. Finalized the CPA before having gotten to a sustainable political solution with regard to Darfur. It's a question based on a statement. Number 6. Internationally, in all these international political talks, sometimes, because you are continuing, going further, you build on your achievements of last week, last month, last year, sometimes you may need to step backwards and to reflect and to say, well, we took the wrong decision, and we have to start all over again, not from the very beginning, but that last step was wrong. Maybe, in my view, anyway, we should have done so after having reached the DPA, the Darfur Peace Agreement in Abuja, because that was a wrong agreement, it was a false agreement, and it added to the conflict, it further strengthened the position of the regime. Sometimes you have, together in an international political framework, to take a step backwards, which is difficult, of course, but if you continuously build further on something which is uneven, false, counterproductive, you have to reflect. Number 7. United Nations, UNHCR, OCHA, UNDP, all those organizations are all bodies in themselves with a long history, and also all their governmental bodies and governments in the boards, which sometimes say something completely different in the one board as in the other board, because the diplomats are coming from different ministries at home and they fight with each other. So the UN is also paralyzing itself, and we need a unified approach. You cannot merge all these organizations of the UN. That is politically impossible. You should never speak about coordination, because coordination is just a cloak. You need a unified approach, which means in the field, the duty, obligation of all organizations to work together, not to just define their own track. The duty to use a common infrastructure. Every organization has to use the same transportation infrastructure, the same communication infrastructure, the same infrastructure with regard to intelligence, and the same infrastructure with regard to security. And all these organizations having their own mandates and equipment and infrastructure, it creates a chaotic situation, which very often is being abused in a divide and rule strategy by the authorities in a country itself. You need a unified approach with a central command. Otherwise, you are not effective. Which means at the same time, and that's my point number 8, that in the UN, which means Geneva and New York, you have to delegate to the field. Headquarters have to delegate to the field political, humanitarian, military decisions to the people whom they did send to the field. Trust your people. They know. All these decisions being taken in New York and in Geneva very often are paralyzing the possibilities of field operations, delegation. And that is difficult for the bureaucrats in New York, for the government steering the bureaucrats in New York, but it is a must, otherwise you are not effective.